Okay, so it's December 24th, 2025. It's about mid-afternoon, right around 0 degrees. And oh look, it is sunshine and beautiful out here now. So we're going to do another sort of walk and talk so I can put some thoughts out there, try and keep it pertinent to everybody so that you realize that there is more to your preparation and planning than just being expert with the firearms you own. I want you to understand that, yeah, okay, it's a big part of my life, but it's not the be-all, end-all. So enjoy the walk and talk. You'll see what I got with me today, and we'll break it down a little bit. Now, how do you suppose this happens in the middle of my horse paddock? Anybody? Anybody? This is a hawk. Yep, it's a hawk. Not quite sure what kind. All right. Remnants of two dead critters on the same walk. Reminds me that I think it's still sound that statistically more people die of exposure to extreme cold every year than people who die from exposure to extreme heat. I believe that statistic is still true. I may have to confirm that. Don't quote me on it. If you want to, fact check it. But it's another one of the reasons that I like living in the Northern Hemisphere. It makes people tougher. In some places, the snow is still deep, even though we had the big melt back. On your hike, you can go from basically bare grass to what looks like about 9 inches of snow in the drifted areas. And of course, it tires the dog out. On that note, I got my two canine friends out with me again, getting them their exercises. And oh, look, there is snow, but I have no snowshoes on because +4 yesterday. It was so warm, most of it's melted back. The snow's not even an inch deep, except in some of the drifted places maybe. Yeah, and we get a chance on another day. We'll talk about the boot structure I'm wearing today, why it looks the way it does, why I prefer that in the winter months. But in the meantime, we'll talk about some other things like frostbite. Now, these are historical accounts of my experiences. I want you to understand that, it's from my perspective and the way I remember it. I won't necessarily bring in everybody's names. If you were part of it, you'll know who you were. And your recollection of the circumstances may be different than mine. Just understand, I'm not making it up. It's the way I remember it. And that's kind of way these walk and talks will probably go. And that is, let's start with frostbite. So, in this part of the world, we get sometimes 5-6 months of snow. Sometimes we get really cold weather. But I grew up in this part of the world, and I can tell you the first time I recall ever having frostbite. I don't remember exactly what year, what day, but the circumstances around it was I was a young boy, and I had not been old enough to join the army, and I was out snowmobiling, I think it was Erin Lake, with one of my friends. And you know what? Young boys are not very smart. And we didn't own a snowmobile, but I had a chance to go, and I wasn't well prepared for it. And I remember wearing rubber boots back at a time when economy sucked and jobs weren't available and my parents were not doing well financially. And that's what I had. And I remember being out in the extreme cold all day in those rubber boots on that snowmobile. And every time we stopped, my friend would let me put my feet up near the engine under the cowling to try and get them warmed up rather than quit our snowmobiling adventure for the day. Yeah, back then, young guys like us, we were just turned loose on the world with a snowmobile. No special rules. You didn't have to have a special trail permit. It was just something we did as part of growing up. Now, I do remember at the end of that adventure that day, sitting in my friend's basement where they had a big wood stove, and getting my rubber boots off was almost impossible. And my feet, the excruciating pain that I felt from my feet being partially frozen from that day adventure, almost brought tears to my eyes. And It was not a good experience. But I survived it without even a trip to the hospital. And people say, well, how do you know it was frostbite? Okay, it's like this. When you experience that much pain on a frozen appendage, it is the early onset of frostbite. You cannot deny it. And it is unlike any other pain I have ever felt in my life anyways. Now, that was the first time. And I was kind of a silly young man, you know, living the adventure. Early on, I joined the reserves, the military reserves. And I remember the second time I had frostbite on my feet was in this part of the world on my first ever winter warfare exercise. And I remember being out, I don't know what the scheme was. It was a patrol or whatever with a whole bunch of other soldiers. And it went from basically well below zero to above zero and raining. And then back down to like twice as cold, well below zero in a 24-hour period. And we were marching through the night. And when we finally stopped, again, my feet were frozen. Now, the reason why they were frozen is because, not that we didn't have good gear, I had a pair of Canadian Army issue mucklucks on. And for those that don't know, it's a big white outer nylon boot with wool duffel socks that go inside. And there's some other gear that goes with it, like your wool socks and your nylon socks that go under your wool. Perfect if you're going to be above the Arctic Circle. But the boots I had were not waterproof. And I remember we marched all through that night, and it got super cold. And my boots were soaked, my socks were soaked. They were soaking wet right through. And when we finally made it to shelter, one of the old Quonset huts in Meaford, when they still had them, again, that experience of excruciating pain that you just know the parts of your body have started to crystallize, started to freeze. Now, I was fortunate enough in both circumstances to get to a place where I could go through the freeze-thaw cycle and not suffer any dramatic tissue loss or have to go to a hospital. Very early stages of frostbite. But trust me, it was an unrecordable pain that I felt in those times and survived. So then you start to learn lessons the hard way. One of the things I learned after that adventure is, okay, when you're out in places where the temperature can cycle and you're wearing those Canadian Army issue mucklucks, one of the best ways to protect yourself was to put a good old-fashioned plastic shopping bag, just like this one, over top of the wool duffel socks before you stuck them into the outer boot. That way, if the outer boot got wet, the wool socks would stay dry and your feet could stay warm. Didn't have that problem if you started out in an environment where it was minus 35 and stayed minus 35, like our Arctic operations usually are. Okay? But in this environment, it was not the perfect gear. It wasn't. Now, I learned some tricks from those two early on adventures as I went through my Army life. And then there was a time when I went to Norway and trained with Brigade North of the Norwegian Army. And while we were there, we had to use their gear. And one of the things that they had that we thought was kind of cheesy was they didn't give us mucklucks. They didn't give us Arctic mucklucks. I know, it's Norway. It's cold. No. As a matter of fact, I was told while I was there, Tromsø is actually farther south geographically than the city of Toronto. Didn't know that. I thought just Vikings and Yetis lived in Norway. In any case, the boots, I had my Mark I combat boots, and they gave us a rubber overboot that had a fleece lining in it. I told everybody, it's kind of like putting kitchen gloves on over top of your combat boots. But those boots allowed them to do all kinds of good things with other gear, like downhill ski on their bangy boards, because they were wearing boots that had ankle support and the extra support they needed for that kind of activity. And the whole time I was there, my feet were never cold. Taught me a lesson, okay? And that's why I wanted to tell you today, I am out wearing these over boots. They're called Neos. They're called Neo Navigators, as a matter of fact. the top part here, that's a roll-up, built-in gaiter is what it's called. Makes the boot that much higher, comes up to the bottom of your knee, protects your lower pants from the snow. It's an insulated boot, and inside this booty, I'm wearing Mark I combat boots. Once again, the outer material is fabric, okay? So, initially when I got them, they were brand new. They were waterproof as all get out. And I put a lot of miles on these. There's a lot of threadbare on them from the snowshoe bindings. But these things in this part of the world have proven to be phenomenal. Plus, it allows me, if I need to, I can just get by with a pair of boots. I can just slip them off. Like, you know, if you're going indoors, if you're going into a tent, or if you're going into your house, just slip them off and continue to wear my combat boots or my hiking boots, which I've done quite often in these. And I really like them in that sense. There's something to think about. Okay? As a general rule, we want to buy, you know, the big puffy snowmobile boots, the Arctic boots, all the stuff that, okay, just that one boot alone is what you put on. But if that's the only pair of boots you had, summer rolled around, you'll spend the rest of the time wandering around your bare feet. I like the versatility of layering, something I learned in the Army. So these boots layered over top of my Mark ones, and I've worn them down, I'm going to say, well below minus 20 while I was sitting on the tractor running the snowblower, meaning there's not a lot of heat generated, and they've kept my feet quite comfy and cozy in that environment. And anytime I'm out on snowshoes, even in the real cold weather, feet are comfortable, and I get the extra support of a good solid boot underneath. You'll also notice there's a green string on there, and I'll cover that on another video where that's talking about impromptu repairs, because I've actually worn them out a little bit. They're great boots. I love them. I've had them, you know, probably over 5 years now. I can't remember exactly when I got them, but it's a good option. They're available in this day and age. Okay, I think I bought them from the company called Brown Bear, and they were really good to deal with too when I bought them, because you know what, I talked to them about the different things and the designs of the boots, and they were always willing to talk to me about it. But these are called Neo Navigators. The only thing I dislike is, you see those big kind of cleat type treads on the side. Those sometimes interfere with snowshoes or snowshoe bindings, but I'll accept that because of the quality of the boot and what it does for me the rest of the time. Hey, bring that here, Ranger. Bring it right here. That's a good one. Yeah. So that's a short walk and talk. And just for those, you know, if you want to know, no, I'm not out in the wild back living out of a teepee or any weird stuff like that. I'm about 100 yards from the house. I have access to some normal, everyday, natural landscape. I like to get out every day with my dogs and exercise them, even in the middle of winter. It's all part of, you know, the staying reasonably physically well in order to survive what the world has to offer, right? And sometimes I even challenge my own mental toughness. And the reality is okay, so I'm 200 yards from the house. Somebody knows where I am. If I don't show up for 3 hours, somebody's going to come looking for me. Now, they may struggle to find me because, hey, you got to be reasonably healthy physically and maybe a little bit mental tough to follow my steps some days and get to where I might be in trouble. But it's the same as always. The more you know, the better prepared you are. I don't need a whole lot of gear. I tell everybody, the average human being, even in the middle of winter, can survive 24 to 48 hours stranded out here alone if they're wearing the bare minimum of protective clothing and have a desire to survive. So I'm not worried, and my dogs aren't worried, and the rest of my family shouldn't be worried either. Life lesson: frostbite sucks. That's from experience. I've had some other minor cases like every soldier has, where you get it on your ears or on your fingers or on your nose, those parts of your body that are always exposed in extreme conditions. But honestly, having my feet frozen twice in my life, to the point where it brought tears to my eyes, okay, That's how bad the pain was, and I couldn't walk, and it took time to get them thawed out so I could function. And no, I never told anybody. It was one of those things I kept to myself. One, as a young boy, I didn't want my parents to know that I was out in my rubber boots snowmobiling on Aaron Lake all day in the freezing cold. Probably wouldn't have been happy about that. And as a young soldier, there was no way giving someone else the satisfaction of knowing that I was struggling a bit. That's the mental toughness part. It's being able to put on a brave face in times when you can without sacrificing your life. Okay? There's a limit to it. In any case, look at that dog go. He loves chasing things. Frisbees. And of course, this plastic dog toy with a chunk of trail tape. Bring it here, right close. Yep, this is his addiction. Being outside, fetching things that I throw. And the other old dog, his game is bark or make snow angels. Well, that's it for today. See how that comes out in the end. It's Christmas Eve. And if you do subscribe to satanic cult rituals, it's okay. I get it. Have a Merry Christmas. Ranger. Ranger. Good boy. There we go. End of the trail. 1.37 kilometers in the snow, playing fetch. 2 tired dogs. Yeah, try and do 1.5 every day minimum. And 2 dead animals on the same walk. Interesting.